You're listening to the Pink Property Podcast, where each week we will discuss hot property topics, introduce you to members of our team as well as special guests, and let you know about all the things that are going on at David Lee. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Pink Property Podcast. I'm Leo O'Brien, joined as ever by David Kirby.
Morning.
This week we wanted to talk to you about the direct comparisons between short and long-term rentals and really sort of an Airbnb type rental against the benefits of a long-term rental for your property. As international travel is now back on the cards and there's and it's very much an option for many of us with more stuff opening up even this week, which they're hoping for the October half term. The record levels of demand for UK short-term rental property may not continue. Last year was an unprecedented year. Yep. It was sort of coined the year of the Great British Staycation, where everybody stayed but stayed UK based rather than travelling abroad and getting on a plane. As the COVID restrictions were sort of fluctuating from week to week as to what you needed to do, different testing, different form filling and restrictions changing, sometimes even when people were in destination. So going abroad last year was a little bit sort of touch and go for people, and lots of people chose to stay, which obviously hence the rental prices being so good. Many clients also reported it to us as well. You know, they were looking, availability was really scarce and prices were at a record high.
Absolutely. So sort of a rough idea of what Airbnb is, I suppose most of you know, but obviously, it's the ability for a landlord to let quite often themselves through the Airbnb website to customers on short-term basis. So 1 night, 2 nights, a week, longer if they want. But the idea is sort of holiday lets on a short term, obviously with the intention of earning more money over sort of more of a long-term let. Sounds very good on paper. Like Lee said, a lot of people have been staycationing in the UK over the last couple of years, and hopefully that will continue to go on in the future. But there are some things you've got to be aware of. It's not that easy to decide. There's sort of comparison between the two, short and long term. So we want to run through a few things that we think about as a comparable. So point number 1 is furniture, Lee.
So if you plan to let your property to holiday makers, they are simply going to turn up with a suitcase full of clothes, as you would a hotel. They'd like that kind of hotel-like experience where everything is on tap, ready for them to use, because they pay good money. They sometimes pay up to hotel money for these rentals on a one nightly basis. Absolutely. So they're going to turn up with a suitcase of stuff. You need to ensure everything else is there for them on point, because one of the big things about Airbnb is they're really customer review driven. Yep. So you're probably not going to get lots of interest in your Airbnb until you've got a couple of 5-star reviews. Some people have tested it, and they're not going to do that if everything isn't on hand. So we're talking beds, bedclothes, plates, cutlery. Sometimes even Airbnb hosts are putting on little welcome packs with tea, coffee, biscuits, things like that to greet people into the property when they arrive. So if you've got an empty property, you need to make sure you've prepared for this, because it can come at quite an expense to get an empty property ready for that sort of ideal short-term let.
And the other point on that is, once you've committed to short-term let and you bought the furniture and you've fully furnished it, if you then change your mind and want to go back to normal renting, you've got all this furniture.
You might end up with a load of furniture,
so you've got a load of stuff. So just consider that. Point 2 is bills. As a short-term landlord, you're going to be paying all the bills there. So yes, you will increase your income, but your expenditure is going to be higher. So all your utility bills, you'll be paying council tax, water, gas, electricity, phone line, internet. People are going to want high-speed internet. Absolutely. They're going to think that that's part of it. So you're going to need to make sure that you've got your broadband in there and easy access Wi-Fi. So just be aware of that. That's something else you're going to have to put in is, all your bills. And then there's some other bits, cleaning.
Laundry.
All these bits that someone's going to expect if you are buying, these niceties for people. There's going to be a food bill. There might be some drinks bills on there as well. So, consider the bills, consider the costs.
Number 3 is demand. So in order to maximize your income and really make the benefit of these higher prices that people pay on a nightly rate, you need to ensure full occupancy throughout the year. So this sort of comes around the marketing of the property. You need to make sure you've got some beautiful photos, potentially a video, a tour, a floor plan, and it's positioned well. It's got a great description within these short-term rental sites to be attractive, to try and give you maximum occupancy. However, be prepared that although your property might receive £250 a night, for example, in high season, there could well be a low season for your property and the demand for your area. So the property may sit empty for a period, or could be let at maybe half the rate, as the low season rate could be half of what the high season rate could be. Just make sure you've budgeted for it. Make sure that you've taken a fair estimation across the entire year for occupancy. To give you an idea, some of the best Airbnb rental properties or short-term rental properties across the UK have only got a maximum of a 70% occupancy rate. So we're talking really popular parts of Norfolk and Suffolk and Isle of Wight and places like that. They are getting top rates. So maybe hedge yourself down a little bit, or just find yourself accordingly. But
being realistic on what you own and
70%
where
is
it
probably as good as it's going to get. So just make sure that you've budgeted correctly for your demand over the year.
Brilliant. Point number 4 is management. So management of an Airbnb style property is going to be labour intensive. So if you're going to do it yourself, you're going to be a maid, you're going to be a shopper, a gardener, a cleaner. You're going to have to deal with all the administration, all the bookings, taking the money. So it's going to be quite a labour intensive job. If on the other hand you wanted to outsource that to a management company to manage that for you, obviously it's going to be a lot more money because it's a lot more labour intensive than your long-term property let and property managers like we have here at David Lee. So again, it's a costing. Really cool, great, but yeah, it's going to be very intensive to manage that. On another point, if it's long-term, most people manage via an agency. If they don't, you're quite labour intensive at the beginning and at the end of a tenancy. But if your property's in good nick and you've got a good tenant and obviously a good landlord, then it should be quite low labour intensive throughout that tenancy. So just be aware. It's going to be very labour intensive to manage an Airbnb. Factor that into your costs. Your time is a cost. So make sure you've factored that in as well.
And I think the way in which tenants look after property can be quite different.
Absolutely.
As well. So your longer term tenant might treat something a bit more like a home, potentially with that bit more respect, whereas the short term tenants are a quick in, quick out, and do potentially treat it a bit like a hotel room. So there might be little nicks and bumps, spillages, breakages that need repairing throughout the year that you wouldn't necessarily have in a long-term let. So that is something to be aware. Just that high rate of turnover sometimes puts a high rate of wear and tear into the property.
Absolutely.
Number 5 is in contrast to that, really, is the cheaper management costs. The professional management, as David said, of a long-term let is far cheaper than a short-term let due to the increased levels of work. Long-term management, just to give you some ideas, is probably going to pay around 10% of the revenue generated against a 20% bill as a minimum, really, for a short term. So it's double the price. So you need to ensure you're getting double the return, really, throughout the year. Yeah,
exactly. Number 6 is protection. It's agency agreement. So that protection between you and the tenant, or the tenant and you. Obviously, at long-term rentals, we have everyone on an AST, an assured short hold tenancy, with a 5-week deposit. So you've got that protection of an agreement, the ability to evict people if required, and obviously, you hold that deposit. Whereas Airbnb, they'll have their own contract, but it's nowhere near the protection that an AST would afford you. They'll take different amounts of deposit. That's probably down to you as a landlord on what you can and what you can't take. But you're not going to get that protection that you do with a long-term tenant. So just be aware of that. Agency agreements and that protection for you as a landlord and you as a tenant will be different on a short-term Airbnb sole let.
So, sort of in conclusion, really, there are positives and negatives to both sides. You know, location is important depending on that demand thing. Looking at where are these popular areas, it might work better in city centres as opposed, or holiday destinations, or something perceived as a holiday destination, rather than your general suburban commuter belt type of areas. However, I think in our view, if you're looking for that stable, consistent income with low levels of participation from you as a landlord, and a hands-off sort of investment, then long-term renting is definitely a better way forward than the short-term, labour-intensive holiday rental business. However, if you'd like any further advice on this, or if you've got a property that you're considering, then we'd happily help you assess the benefits, assess the sort of rental demand and the pricing in the market that they would require, and advise you accordingly as to whether it could be a good way forward or not. So yeah, please reach out if you've got anything that you are considering going down this route with. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back next week. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you.